I'm Mike Matthew. I work at Presto Assistant, which is a database management tool to help band directors and choir directors, all music teachers, get organized and get back to the podium or go home early. So yeah, and Tim asked me to jump in here, and he couldn't be here this evening, so I was happy to jump in and help. Really, what we have is a bunch of questions that Tim has put forward just to kind of give some insight to how the sight reading process works. I know I worked as a band director for 13 years. I think most of you worked as band directors as well. I'm sure that you're not doing sight reading pieces full time, most likely. But I know that we always approach it a certain way when I was teaching, as kind of like, hey, this is the game you play, and here's all the rules. And, you know, we really worked hard at all the places I taught to make sure the kids had a good experience and different versions of, you know, how that went every year. But it's a good, you know, it's a good problem solving thing. I have lots of tales of woe and lots of tales of excitement to tell about when I was teaching from sight reading. My favorite was at Trinity High School, where the head football coach would come to sight reading room and drive the bus, and he would get really excited about like, yeah, get in there about them, you know, playing the music for the first time. You're really excited about that. So I think that is the way it should be, that it's a chance to play a new piece of music, and it's even more fun when it's like real music, you know? So I think some of this is going to be related to what y'all are thinking about when you're writing music, but also kind of your background and how you came to this, or maybe even how the process works itself. So I gave a little bit about myself, but let's go around and just everybody tell a little bit about yourself and how long you've been composing, maybe your experience. I think one of Tim's things here is, can you name every piece you've written that's been in the sight reading room? So some of you might not be able to, but let's start with Willie.
Well, I started teaching in 1985. I've taught for 30 years. All my experience, I'm from Indiana, went to school in Illinois. All my experiences right here in Texas, and it was absolutely marvelous. I retired in 2014. Started my composing career late. Started in 1993. I was 31 years old when I wrote my first. And it was really out of necessity. Back in those days, I was teaching middle school non-varsity band, and there just wasn't a whole lot of literature back. Today, there's a plethora of it, but back then, not so much the case. So, I wrote myself a little march, and it was for my band, out of necessity. And at the behest, long story short, at the behest of one of my mentors, I submitted it for publication, not thinking it would go anywhere, and lo and behold, it did. And that's basically how I got short started. That's the short version. There's a much longer one, but we don't have that kind of time.
Do you remember all the sight reading pieces that you've gotten out there? I know I've had kids play probably a dozen of them, it seems like, but maybe not.
I remember what I wrote the last time. So
nice. Carol, how about you? What's your experience, and what have you been doing? How long have you been composing?
Yeah, sure. I was also a Texas band director. I taught middle school and high school band. And so I started writing professionally probably 25 years ago. My main writing to start out was with marching band arranging, and then I started doing concert band a little bit later. And so I've been doing that for a while. And I do that full time now. But and I just really started doing the sight reading stuff a few years ago. So I've written a few. So yeah, I can name them if you want to know what they are.
I mean, that's what Tim says. I don't know if he's just trying to be funny or not, but yeah, go for it.
Okay. Summer Glen. No, I think that was Summer Glen. Yeah, it was a level 1. And then Ridgeview Overture was a level 2. And then Clear Creek Canyon, I think, was the next year. That was a level 2. So I've just done level 1 and 2 sight reading.
Awesome. And we have Mr. Jack Wilds here as well. Can you tell us about yourself, your experience, etc.?
Yeah, sure. I've been composing for, I guess, maybe 15 years or so now. I also taught band for 5 years, middle school and high school in the Austin area, and went back to school for a master's and did the doctorate thing in composition, and now I teach at Texas State. So when I write sight reading pieces, it's just, I'm asked to do them, and I'm happy to do it for everybody. So anyway, I mean, that's pretty much it. I can't name all the ones that I've done, and I owe Willie a lot as far as the technique and the approach to writing those pieces. And also, Willie was instrumental in my development as I was learning to arrange for young band as well. He's one of the best teachers I've ever had, so I owe him quite a bit.
Grab the Kleenex, Willie.
Checks in the mail, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Dennis Evelyn also was asked to be on this panel, but I think he couldn't make this, but he wrote down a bunch of answers. So I think if you had all written them down, you probably know all the actual pieces you've written in order. Dennis, I'm going to read all of his questions or his answers out. He says he's originally from Illinois. He retired in 2020, taught band for 35 years, just like some of you middle school and high school level. 3 of those were in Illinois and the other 32 years in Laredo, Texas. All right. He went to Western Illinois and the Vandercook School of Music. And let's see, he started composing in 2001, and he was published by Barnhouse and TRN. And he started doing self-publishing, and he also has stuff that's out there by J.W. Pepper, Penders, and Stanton's Music starting next year. And then he has all the songs he's written, I think, for the Texas Sightreading Project, including Quail Hollow, which is a level 5. This is from 2003. Sorry, Quail Hollow Overture from 2003. Winfield Celebration, level 6 from 2004. American Celebration, level 5, 2008. Del Mar Celebration, level 3 from 2009. And Big Creek Overture from 2022. Didn't put his level on that one. I think I remember some of those from the practice sight reading books that we would all have in bands. We'll go in a different order this time, but another question is, how do you approach the sight reading piece? Do you think about it as, here is the rubric of the level you've been asked to write, or do you write a piece of music and just try to like put that piece of music into the different buckets afterwards? Let's start with Jack this time.
So, I mean, you definitely have to take the level that you're, at least as far as I'm concerned, you have to take the level that you're writing for into consideration. I mean, you have to do that with any band piece at any level that you're writing for, whether it's going to be for the sight reading room or more of a concert piece. So you definitely have to start there. Then from that point, you know, I just try to write a melody that's going to be really sticky, and not just throw everything in that's in the criteria, because it doesn't all need to be there. And if we think about the music that we play on concerts, they don't all have key changes. You know, 2-minute long pieces don't really have key changes most of the time. So it's a little unreasonable to kind of shoehorn things in that don't necessarily need to be there, in my opinion.
Yeah. What about you, Willie?
Yeah, very much the same. You know, I'm going to piggyback Jack a lot because, you know, I'm very much in the same boat there. You know, the first thing you must do is take the level into consideration. And there is a rubric that's provided by UIL. And the thing I like to advocate is you don't have to put every single little element that's in there. You don't have to try to squeeze it all in. Just make sure you're staying within the parameters. You know, people have said, you know, I've heard other sight reading composers say, well, I want to write a piece that you would want to play on a concert. Well, you know, as far as my stuff, I don't care if you want to play it on a concert or not, you know, but I do want it to be accessible. I do want it to be fun. I do want it to be fair. So, you know, that's a huge one for me. And the thing I love to do is I've actually gone to a lot of sight reading contests and just heard people play these pieces, particularly mine, and just to get an idea of what to do the next time around, what I can do better or what I need to stop doing. So that has been very helpful. It was such a great eye-opening experience to get into the sight reading rooms and actually watch these people go through the process and put that thing together in 5-10 minutes or whatever it's been. So just basically thinking about what you got to work with, and I try to consider, you know, you know, the levels of pretty much every region, every district throughout the state. You don't want to just try to write with one, well, I don't say one tier in mind. You know, you want it to be where, you know, it can be accessed and approached from, you know, all angles by, you want everybody basically have a fair shot. So that's my general.
Yeah, well said. Carol, what's your approach to the whole process?
Yeah, a lot of similarities there. Definitely, I start out looking at the criteria and the grade level that I'm writing for. I mean, and like we all said, we do that when we write any pieces. I think we have grade level in mind usually when we start out, because that affects ranges especially and everything. But yeah, if you go look, you can go to the UIL Texas page of the website, and you can go under concert sight reading, and then you can eventually get to a link called criteria. So anybody can look at this. I'm looking at it right now on my screen, and it tells you the different criteria. that we are looking at when we write. So, again, I've mainly done just level 1 and level 2. I noticed that it's a little bit different than a few years ago when I wrote some. So they've actually eased up the level 1 and level 2 a little bit, because when I first wrote it a couple of years ago, I mean, it said you could have a meter change even for level 1 and some different things. And I was like, well, wait a minute, do we really want to do that? And so, and so I've noticed now they've sort of made it a little more, just clear, for that, and a little bit less, but what they made me really understand too, because, I was always used to taking whatever band I had to contest, so I was familiar with that. But when I was writing, they, Gabe and stuff, they kind of reminded me, hey, it's not just middle schools that are actually going to play this level. So there are certain high schools, that are like 1A or sub non-varsity, or, those kinds of things are going to be playing level 1 and level 2. And sometimes they may have one tuba in their band, or no tuba, or, or very limited percussion and things like that. So that was very helpful when it just kind of reminded me that throughout the whole state, you're going to have all these varieties of bands that are going to play these different levels. So yeah, but if anybody wants to go check it out, you can look at the criteria and what we're looking at, what rhythms we're allowed to use. And I've noticed they put here like certain rests on count 1. You shouldn't do that, and everything. So we're not trying to ever trick people up. And the other thing I would say is to me, having a good melody is crucial, so that it would be something, if you wanted to play this again, that's fine. But I think they encourage us to make it sound like a real piece of music. And to me, if there's good melody, that's something that the kids can latch onto too. And that, repetition for the younger levels is super important, so that they hear something, then it comes up in their part, maybe then the highs have it, maybe the lows, but there's enough repetition where it's going to be attainable, and they're going to be successful in the sight reading room.
As a musician, I appreciate that, because I remember teaching one year, and the day after UIL, I think I was whistling a song, and I was like, what is this? And my coworker was like, that's a sight reading piece. I was like, oh, it's like a real piece of music, Dennis's answer for how do you approach sight reading, he says when composing for sight reading, he likes to compose the way he would normally would, and then go back and make sure it fits within the criteria. He tries to make sure there is always a nice melody and counter melodies. And one important thing is to make sure the piece is very playable and fair to the students and the director. All right, moving on. Let's see. Describe how the process of UIL choosing the sight reading piece works from your end. Carol, let's hear what you have.
So can you clarify that question?
I think it means like,
mean?
How does someone contact you and say, hey, would you like to do a sight reading piece this year, or something like that?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, for me, that was Gabe Musella, who's the, runs the music division at UIL. So I think they just, kind of try to see, and they book us, we have to write it like a year in advance of when it's, or a little more than a year of when it's actually going to be read. So it's sort of, they kind of put the pieces of the puzzle in place way beforehand, because you have to have time to do it. So they're kind of commissioning you to write it. And then asking, what kind of level you want to do, and all that good stuff. So,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Willie, how does it look from your side?
Oh yeah, very much the same. I hear from Gabe, and Gabe's a good buddy of mine. And generally we get emails. There's the formal email, but usually from Gabe I'll get the phone call. Hey brother, I need you. All right, dude. We can do that. We can certainly do that. No problem at all. And I would like to give a great big thank you to Mr. Musella right now, because since Gabe basically came in and took charge of the program, he's made it much easier for us writers. He's just done and is doing so much to just make our jobs easier. And I just want to go on record as saying I just really appreciate that man and what he's done for us.
Oh, that's good. Jack, is yours the same answer, or?
Yes, except that mine comes by carrier pigeon.
Oh, okay.
No, it's exactly the same. Yeah, it's the exact same process. And I do like that Gabe added in the open reading sessions on the sight reading pieces, so that if any corrections need to be made, they can be caught before they go out to everybody. I think that was a really good addition to the process.
Yeah, I was going to just interject that too, Jack. I was like, I thought that was a great idea. We sort of have a trial, so it's like a draft, and just to make sure there's no weirdness and it all works and stuff. So
for that part, where does that happen?
I think it rotates, right, Willie? Or Carol, you guys know, right?
Yeah.
As far as the open session, I believe it's somewhere down around the Austin area. I believe one of the UT bands read these tunes.
But I think this year it might be in Houston, or this coming next year might be in Houston. So they're probably rotating around different college groups can play them for us.
And one year Texas State read it too. So
this will not surprise you, but Dennis says, I'm usually contacted by Gabe Musella, assistant director of UIL music, in December, and he asked if he wants to compose a given level. Usually gets a contract in a time frame when the first draft is due. He says there's a committee that meets to make suggestions, and then he goes back to make edits if necessary, and then make sure the piece meets the standards that's set. And he says he's more of a timeline. Sometime in early May, the piece is read by the University of Houston Wind Ensemble. So y'all are saying maybe that changes around. And if any corrections are needed, then Mr. Masella will let me know. Make the changes if needed, and return everything by the date assigned. So sounds like Gabe is the one making it better, the whole process better for all the kids in Texas. All right, moving on. Thanks for that. So I know y'all used to be directors as well. What do you look for in a great sight reading composition? Willie, what do you think?
Well, I try to write what I would look for. So whatever you've seen on one of my pieces is generally just what I look for. In that, in that scene, because I've been on both ends of that skateboard. So, but what I'm looking just for practicality. Carol said it earlier. I mean, you want a nice melody that you can lean on and that you can relate to. And I don't want to be tricked. Okay, I don't want to be deceived. That's not what this program is about at all. See, these are test pieces, and it's cool to try to do some things that are really nice and really musical. And if you want to try to write something that someone want to play for a concert, that's fine. But the one thing you've got to always remember about this thing is that it's a test piece. Okay, I mean, it's an evaluation of basic skills. Okay. And early in this process, back in the 90s and early 2000s, and I heard composers say things like, well, I'm going to throw that in there a little bit, and that'll get them a little bit, and that'll jolt them, So it's not to put up roadblocks or trick people, or for some composer to come in and try to write his or her magnum opus. See, our job is to help kids. That's what it is. We want to write a piece that's practical, that's playable, that's accessible. Okay. And listen, I think I can speak for all of us, Carol and Jack, when I say that all of our pieces do exactly that. Okay. I mean, we're in it for the kids. And all that music that comes from the three of us is very practical. It's just going to do that. It's going to do just that. So, I mean, if you're practicing reasonably at home sight reading, just do a little bit of basic practicing, you're going to be okay.
Yeah. Carol, what about you? What do you look for in a great sight reading composition?
Yeah, of course, everything he just said. But just showing, that your students can sight read, so rhythms that are appropriate for that level. And I would think it's safe to say we would all agree that the sight reading level it's lower than what they're actually preparing to go perform on the stage in terms of demanding, but it's like when it's put in front of you and you've never seen it before, can you count these kinds of rhythm patterns and play with a good sound and put down the right buttons, in this key. So just evidence that you've been like Willie said, like you've been practicing these kinds of skills in your band hall. So nothing tricky, but good sound rhythms for that level, including some rest, not to be putting rest in weird places and all that kind of stuff, but rests are part of music too. So occasionally have a rest in there, something that everybody can play together. I try to make I try to go with safety in numbers. So we're never trying to have little bitty groups of people play or anything that's going to be scary. We know everybody's nervous anyway, but it's just, you have these skills that you've been working on. And so like Willie said, this is just a vehicle to showcase that. So I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Yeah. Jack, what do you think makes a good sight reading composition?
Well, I mean, like I said earlier, Willie was my earliest mentor on this, and I learned literally everything that I know about writing sight reading music from Willie. So I'm going to have to just second everything that he said. And then I guess it would allude to something that Carol said earlier about repetition. It is important to build as much repetition into the piece as possible to a reasonable extent. And we would do the same thing in writing our concert compositions too, right? Like repetition is what helps you to make sense of a piece of music as you're listening to it. And so you definitely want for those 2 minutes of sheer terror that the kids are experiencing while they're playing that piece, for it to be as intuitive as possible.
Hopefully it's not terror, but I know what you mean. It's hard to remember what it's like to be the 14-year-old sitting there doing that, at least for me. Let's see. Dennis's answer for a great sight reading composition: it should meet the requirements set by the UL committee. This includes the length, the appropriate rhythms, the ranges, etc. And he says, since he has the experience of taking his bands to sight reading in the past, he makes an effort to make sure the piece is fair for everyone concerned. And he always puts himself in the shoes of the director and considers the amount of time to give instructions and explanations for the piece that he wrote. It's good. As a follow-up to that, what do you look for in a concert composition? Just throwing a curveball at you here in a concert composition. Go for it.
Well, pretty much the same thing. Now, in our concert compositions, where groups are obviously going to have time to prepare, especially like a commission, then you can do some of the little things that we mentioned, and where you can do like little section solos. Carol mentioned individual playing at some point. You can do that sort of thing. And but that's the difference between just the regular concert music and the sight reading. Again, 2 words with the sight reading: test piece. Okay, that's what they are. Okay, they're just they're music. They're little musical examinations. And we just want to see what you've done in the band hall, all that. Just throughout the year. And if you've been doing what you need to do anyway, more often than not, you're going to be successful at sight reading. Okay. I mean, listen, we're not out to get you. We're not out to trick you, the 3 of us anyway. Look, we just want to know if you're dead or alive. And that's pretty much it.
Jack, what do you look for in a good concert composition?
I mean, it depends on the grade level. I think whenever I go to write a piece of music, like I said earlier, I always take the level of the piece into account from the very beginning. And I think you just have to try to make something that's really beautiful and meaningful for the kids and the director, that fits within those parameters that they can play and that will be useful to them. I'd like, when I'm writing a grade half, I like to compare that to writing a haiku. You can write a really beautiful, meaningful haiku, even though you have these very, very strict parameters that you're working within. So I always try to see how people that, when somebody really takes those restrictions you're working in and does something really creative and moving with it, then I really find that admirable in a concert piece.
Nice.
That's really cool, Jack. I think that's really interesting. No, that was 8. Sorry. Okay.
I was about to say, is he doing it?
No, I was doing haiku. That
right.
was really cool. No, messed up the middle one. That was 8, but that's okay.
Carol, what do you look for in a good concert composition?
Yeah, same thing. Well, for me, good melody and good counter melodies. But even more than that, what you can do a little bit more with your regular concert, again, like what Willie said and Jack said, you have more time to work on it. So you can experiment a little bit more with some variety of color, timbres, and not everybody playing in block, so much all the time. And maybe some other little things too. You can do something with your trombones where they get to do just some little different sort of effects or things, whatever the nature of your piece is. And certainly we wouldn't do those things in a sight reading test piece, but so, yeah.
And Dennis had a follow-up for this as well. He said he tries to include good melodies, harmonies, etc. The main difference is that it can write without as many restrictions. And then obviously, depending on the grade level, expand the rhythms and the harmonic progressions beyond what he might normally compose for the sight reading project. Makes sense. All right. Jack, what is your advice to young band directors regarding the sight reading process and the sight reading music?
I mean, I would say read the old pieces that are out. Make sure you practice sight reading every day, even if it's something short, and really practice the process, and just, have a game plan. Don't just go in and do it, right? Like try and plan it out step by step, something that you'll be able to fit to the piece no matter what the piece is like.
Yeah. Carol, what's your advice for young band directors?
Well, everything Jack said, and also, yeah, practicing the rhythm patterns and things like that, even on just clapping, counting, on playing on one pitch, things that they're doing that most people are doing in their band halls with beginners, even, you know. So again, you're starting that with your beginners, leading up, preparing them for music literacy. That's what this is music literacy. That's what sight reading is. So you're teaching them those skills. Maybe it's on one note at first when they're still just learning how to make a good sound. Then they start to be able to learn how to put down more vowels and slides and, you know, technique. That's called technique. And so you just, if you start preparing them that way from the beginning, most directors who do that aren't scared at all when they go in it because they're just, their kids are ready. They've been establishing those fundamentals from the beginning. But yes, but also practice sight reading pieces with them and going through the process, however you're going to do the process, so that it's not suddenly a weird thing on the day of UIL. But it's like, oh, we've just been doing this a lot anyway. This is what we always do. So.
Yeah, Willie, what do you think?
Yeah, you bet. All that. And back when I was a baby band director, way back in the day, I had, I had wonderful opportunities to, and I'll say this to any young band director anytime, whenever you can, man, get in your car and go drive to another band hall and watch somebody else do it, you know? I mean, just source out the people that you have respect for, that have done well and that have been successful. And man, just follow that blueprint. Just watch as many really fine band directors out there as you can. I mean, because look, in this business, you truly are who you're with. Okay, association with it is everything. Okay, so if you're hanging around people who are making it happen and who work hard and really want to do well and are excited, you will follow that path. Hang around a bunch of people that's got a cold. I don't care how bad you don't want one, you're gonna get one. You are who you're with.
Well said. Let's see. Dennis has this to say to advice to young band directors. His advice is to start sight reading early in the school year. Don't wait until you get close to UIL. Give yourself plenty of time to cover all the necessary rhythms and keys and articulations, etc. When you start early in the year, you'll have more time with similar chunks reading unison lines, and then progress to short etudes, short songs, eventually larger works. He says to make sure your students learn the scales that relate to the keys you might encounter in sight reading. Good idea. Try to make sure your students understand how to articulate different ways that they might encounter, cover the tempo markings, etc. He says he used to use the stars for sight reading, which is sharps and flats, time signatures and tempo markings, accidentals, rhythm, and signs, which would be dynamics, articulations, tempo changes, repeats, etc. It's good. Stars for sight reading. It's good. All right. Nice. Let's start with Willie. Willie, what's your experience directing bands in the sight reading room, and how does it influence the way you write sight reading?
Okay. Well, I mean, I did it for years. I mean, back before, I'm old enough to have done it back before the process was implemented and back in the old days where we were just pulling stuff off the shelf and reading. And so, with my experience, I just did everything that Carol and Jack mentioned. I just, did a lot of practicing, and I just loved watching other people go through the process. And I just like watching other people with their groups. And do it whenever you can. Jack mentioned play it every day. I mean, we didn't do it every day. We did it most days. We did it whenever we can. And whatever you can get your hands on. You might not be able to read a big piece every day, but you can read a line. You can read a rhythm. I mean, just any little thing you can do just to, just to keep the kids in the practice of it. And here again, and if it's a good, fair, well-written piece, and if you're doing all these things, you're going to be okay. And I never really panicked or worried about the sight reading process because I mean, I just did what I was told to do. I'm very blessed to have had some phenomenal mentors down through my career, and who just guided me my entire, like I would say, easily my first decade. I was lucky to have somebody there to say, this is doing good, you're doing great there. Nope, that's not so good, try this. And in retrospect, I'm very glad I listened to these gals.
Yeah,
nice. Carol, what is your experience directing bands and sight reading? How does it influence the way you write music?
Yeah, I guess similar to what Willie was saying too, but yeah, I took several bands to contests, middle school and high school, and non-varsity groups too, and so just trying to prepare them ahead of time was the biggest thing for me. Is you just can't wait till the last second. I mean, so that seemed to work better. And again, and kind of like Willie said, it doesn't have to be a big piece that you read all the time. And you can even write out some things if you want. Hey, we're focusing a lot on B flat major this week, because one of this other pieces we're spending a lot of time is. So I'm just going to write some little chunks, and we're just going to, you could write out something, little 8-bar deal, and just see, hey, everybody, let's try to read this together. It could be a unison thing. So you can just build on that. And I don't know if I have that much to add, but yeah.
That's also a perfect way to rickroll your students, is just pass out sight reading music like that. And they're all playing Never Gonna Give You Up all of a sudden. Sorry,
Yeah,
I have teenagers in my house. We rickroll each other all the time.
that's cool. Hey, and I only actually half answered the question. How did that influence my writing? Well, being in the field all that time. I mean, when you're there, with these young people all the time, I mean, you know what they need. You know what they're capable of. When you're pushing too far. So if you're, like, we've all been in the field, and just that experience just kind of guides us, the way we do, just because of our experiences. I mean, you can't escape your experiences.
What?
And,
Sorry.
yeah,
You just made me think of too, just things even like tempos and stuff. Because we did that, and so we know sort of what's comfortable, how you can do the railroad track. That's a really nice just way to pause before, if you're going to start a new tempo, and just things that just kind of work and aren't going to freak people out. That feel that you're still going to demonstrate these things. Also dynamics. That's another thing. We haven't really touched on that a lot, but I think it's reasonable for your band to demonstrate some knowledge of dynamics, throughout these sight reading pieces too. So be sure in your band hall, you're very much exaggerating those and getting your ensemble to understand, hey, for it to sound soft, you actually all have to really exaggerate, especially when we're all playing together, and things like that. So we want to, not ignore even some basic musical type components, I think.
Jack, with your experience directing bands, how does it influence your writing process?
Specifically for sight reading pieces?
Yes.
I mean, I think there's no substitute for having gone through the process, having prepared a band for contest and taking them through the sight reading process and understanding what that's like I grew up in Texas, so I did the sight reading process as a student as well. I did. Carol, you too. So sort of understanding it from both sides is definitely important, and really does kind of inform the types of decisions that I'll make. Like, sometimes I'll think about doing something and I'll put it in and I'll say, no, I don't think it really needs that. And then I'll just, take it out. Because, like Willie said, like he taught me, it's a test piece, right? So you always are kind of bearing that in mind.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see what Dennis has to say about this. He said, I had several bands that earned straight ones of sight reading. We had a few instances where the sight reading music for our level was more difficult than what it should have been. I'm pretty sure I've been in those rooms too as a band director. Sometimes the level 3 was easier than a level 2. A few times the music just didn't make any sense. It was poorly written. I use that experience to make sure I write music that's fair for everyone involved. So yeah, that's helpful. Oh, interesting one. What do you see being the future of sight reading pieces? Jack, what do you think about that? Just open-ended question.
I think they're all going to have electric guitars.
Bagpipes.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, just really pulling on all of the, all the extended instrumentation that we can add.
And an awful Clyde. Yeah.
So we'll take intonation off the judges' sheets, I guess.
Gonna add the serpent in.
Well, I think like some of y'all have already mentioned, I think Willie was talking about how Gabe Masella has really come in and kind of made it easier for you all to do the work. And then Carol mentioned how the rubrics have changed to be a little bit more, I wouldn't say lenient, but probably more encourage success for people across the board. Right. So maybe is the future leading us to, I don't know. That's open-ended. What do you think, Jack?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess in all seriousness, though, I do think that with those new rubrics, it probably is going to continue to be really important to commission and find composers that have experience writing within that level and that have that kind of have an understanding of the UIL process. And I think they'll continue to refine it, but I think they're starting to get it down really well. I think the process is starting to work nicely. When I was a band director, that was during the time when they switched it to where you could actually look at the score beforehand, and that was fantastic. I really enjoyed that difference. So, I guess they'll just continue to make small tweaks as we go along.
Carol, what do you think? What do you see as the future of sight reading process?
Yeah, I think it's just going to continue on this trajectory, I guess. And they've changed the process a little bit. So, but yeah, I think, like Jack said, tweaking it. And I think when there are things that seem odd, people are really are trying for this to be a successful experience and nothing weird. So I think everyone will just keep, having conversations and, trying to adapt if things need to be changed. But it seems like a lot of good changes have been made from what I can tell.
Willie, what do you think?
Yeah, in recent years, it has evolved, quite nicely. The current administration, Gabe, Brad, they have been so open to band director feedback, and they've been just listening to the directors and just taking people's experiences into account and molding the process by what's actually happening out in the field. And they will continue to do that. And in our current state, I feel very good for the future of sight reading, because as of right now, we are an incredibly capable and caring hands. Okay, we're being led by people, who care about the directors and and what they're doing for their kids. And so, yeah, it's mutually beneficial.
Yeah, and not only that, but like people that were very successful and talented band directors themselves, right? And now they're helping the whole state achieve that. It's great. Dennis is right in line with all of you. He says, under the leadership of both Dr. Kent and Mr. Masilla and the Sight Reading Committee, it seems to me that they're trying to make sure that all of the music fits the requirements, is playable, and is fair. And he believes that every year it is getting better. Hear, hear. All right, so now we get into the weeds a little bit about teaching. What teaching techniques and key points do you think would help kids be the most successful in the sight reading room? Carol, what do you think of that? What teaching techniques and key points do you think would be most helpful?
So do you mean when you're in the sight reading room, like it's the day of? And
Tim wrote this. I'm interpreting it. Maybe, but also maybe ahead of time, right?
Because we already talked about ahead of time, I think, really preparing them, and I think we've kind of touched on that quite a bit. So, and I would agree again with what Willie said too about finding a mentor. So ahead of time, if you don't really understand what this process is, and let's say you moved from out of state and you're like, what in the world? How does this work? Go watch other people, and just so many people have done it already and can guide you in that, for sure. I know when I was a teacher, I went and watched mentors all the time and just stole all their. I asked them, is it okay if I just steal this? This is why do you have to reinvent the wheel? It was just so great, but then when you're in there, I think if you can sing some, I think that helps. You don't have to be able to, but also just really being able to help your kids understand where the transitions are and things like that. Especially tempo transitions, keys, pointing that out. And again, you've already practiced this process with them ahead of time. So what always worked for me is if there was a key change, not only put your finger on the key change, but let's say we've added a flat. Now look through your next several bars. Do you see that note? And touch on that note, where now you're going to have to put down the flat fingering or the sharp, So just really trying to have them apply, not just, oh, I'm looking at a new key signature, but where is that in the music? And there are all kinds of little techniques like that I think can really help them. Especially when they're feeling jittery, but just feel confident about what they're about to play.
Yeah, I like that. It's I think pivoting this question to more of what are some good tips and tricks like that for the students, that is helpful. Do you other guys have any, Jack or Willie, have anything like that you tell the kids that would be hey, do this, it's a key change, touch the paper or something like that for help the kids be more successful?
Yeah, well, as far as my personal experience, I learned this later on in my teaching career. Okay, it took me about 12 years to figure it out. I'm always happy to give this away free. Take your time in a hurry. I mean, cover what you can as thoroughly as you can without rushing and without being frantic. I was pretty rushed and pretty frantic for a lot of years. Then I figured out, you know what? I don't need to do all that. I can be calm. I can relax. And you know what I discovered? I actually got more done when I calmed down. And because I could just really think clearly and and just be very thorough about these little things. And Carol, you're absolutely right about one thing. For these young teachers, especially if you're from out of state, go watch somebody. Listen, I came down here from Indiana, and I'm telling you, buddy, it was different. It was nothing like what I was used to back in the Midwest. So I did that. I did a lot of watching, and I did a lot of observing. But when you're there in the room, yeah, and here again, we've got the opportunity to look over the score for a couple of minutes. So that's cool. That's helpful. We didn't have that luxury back in the day. So here again, we talked about things evolving. That's a great evolution right there. And, just look things over and just take your time. Just be thorough and be clear, and you'll be okay.
Yeah. Jack, you want to add anything?
No, I would just, I think Carol and Willie have already made some really great suggestions. And I would just say, as far as what you can do, once you've observed those veteran teachers and you have a game plan, just keep that in mind and just stick to the plan, and take your kids through the plan and maybe even explain to them what your plan is so that they know what's going to happen and they feel as comfortable as possible.
Yeah, and Dennis had an answer to this. It echoes some of the things that Carol was saying earlier. Make sure you start early in the year, but also make sure that the students really know how to read music correctly, even as beginners. Teach them to tap and clap and count correctly. And then that STARS method he mentioned earlier, and help them read as much as possible. Makes sense? Let's see. This is a fun one. Is sight reading room more enjoyable or less enjoyable or about the same? Is writing a sight reading piece the more enjoyable, less enjoyable, or about the same as like a normal quote unquote piece? What do you think? Willie, what do you think?
Who asked that one? Okay.
Well, you're giggling, so you probably have a good answer.
Oh, well, I don't know. I'll give you an Is it more? You know what? I enjoy writing. Writing is writing. Now, I will say this: the approach is a little different, for sight reading. But I actually really enjoy writing these sight reading tunes. I do because as we all mentioned earlier, because when I sit down and write those tunes, we're writing for so many different ensembles across the state. So I'm thinking about the ensembles, who have, where all the great band programs coming from. And and at the same time, I got to make it accessible, for the Title I districts, for the, I'll just go ahead and say it, for the underprivileged and underserved districts. So, while, there's groups out there that if it's fairly written, they'll do it and they'll do it well without a lot of trouble. I want some of the programs, who don't have all the resources to have a fighting chance. So it's a great challenge, and it's tough in a lot of ways. It's tougher than writing a regular piece because here I'm not writing for a specific group. We're writing for everybody.
Yeah, that's true. Jack, what do you think? Is writing a sight reading piece more enjoyable, less enjoyable, or about the same?
In all honesty, I like writing concert pieces a lot more than writing sight reading pieces because I feel like there's definitely a lot of pressure with the sight reading pieces just to make sure that it's going to work for the kids and the directors, because you definitely don't want to lay an egg on a sight reading piece. With the concert pieces, it's like you can take some chances and you could kind of go for it. And then the group can always help you kind of refine those things as you get towards the premiere. But with a sight reading piece, you do it and then it's out there and everybody's gonna play it. So I always have to be very, very careful and very considerate when doing those.
Carol, what about you?
The sight reading ones are fine. They're, I wouldn't I think I enjoy the regular concert a little bit more just because, like what we already talked about, you can have more variety. And certainly if you're writing for a certain group, they might even have some soloists you can feature or little solo sections and stuff. And certainly we're not going to do that for sight reading. So there's just a little bit more creativity and different things you can do with those pieces that make them different from each other. And especially for these lower, level 1 and level 2 sight reading, which is what I've been doing, which I like it a lot, but there are definitely parameters and you have to stick within those. And so there's only so much you can do in terms of variety, I guess. But, it is what it is. It's, it has its other purpose. So,
yeah.
Only so many ways to spin bologna and mayonnaise, right?
Yeah.
Dennis simply wrote, I enjoy writing both equally. All right. We're getting close to the end here. If there's one thing you could say to a band director to help them with sight reading music, what would it be? And I'm sure that a lot of this has been maybe an echo of this is the summary of all the things you've been saying the whole time. But you say one thing to a band director to help them with sight reading music, what would it be? Jack, what do you think?
I mean, I think we've probably pretty thoroughly covered most of the strategies that I would recommend. I mean, just, sight read at least a little bit every day. That's what I always tried to do. I don't.
Carol, what do you think?
Start early and be consistent. Be consistent with the skills you're working on and in your process.
Yeah. Willie.
I would say to the directors, directors, if you watched the video this far up to this point, just do everything we talked about the last half hour. Merry Christmas.
Right. Dennis says start your students as early as possible reading correctly and don't wait until their second year of playing in band to start doing that. And as he mentioned earlier, have them tap their foot and count out loud. As a percussionist, I wholly agree with that. All right. Well, thanks for your time tonight, everybody. And I'm glad we could get together with all y'all. I think that as myself being a band director at least in the before times before I switched careers into doing what I do now, which is kind of tangentially related to music, I never knew what happened behind the scenes. Like it's just you'd show up and it'd be there's a Willie Owens piece. Like, all right, let's see what it sounds like. So I'm glad you all could take some moments today to share with us at least your thoughts and perspective on it. And I mean, we see Reagan talking about what a real sweepstakes is on Facebook. So we're going to make sure everybody gets a sweepstakes by getting all three parts of the varsity groups in there, including 1/3 of that is sight reading. So it's really important that we get that right. So hopefully people do take that seriously. And I'm sure your comments tonight will be really helpful to people that are preparing along the way too. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Our pleasure.
Hey, that was fun. Good night, everybody.
Yeah,
All right.
Good night.
Bye. Thanks.
See you guys in Chicago.